Friday, 10 a.m. A yellow sticky note on my fridge says Maple Pines, van at 10. Daughter calls it help. Mother calls it a deadline. 2 blocks from the Cedar River, in the split level Robert and I finished with leftover shingles, I line up the dish towel straight and count the seconds. People think old houses creak. This one listens. It knows the difference between taking care and taking over. It knows the rule I live by. The quieter I get, the more dangerous it is to assume I'm agreeing. So I did what a mother does when a van is scheduled to erase a life by lunchtime. I called Dr. Patel and asked for one sentence that matters: sound mind. I rode the bus past the library's bronze children and walked into the courthouse like a person with pockets full of choices. I learned how a signature can unlock a door people tried to close for you. At the credit union, a patient woman showed me the shape of a living trust and the calm of a revocation. I left with a folder that weighs exactly as much as freedom. 10 o'clock becomes 10:05. The kettle cools, the clock doesn't blink. Daughter has plans, son-in-law has a buyer, but mother has papers with dates and names. If you've ever been told your life is already decided, stay. Because before the van can arrive, a judge will have a question and a family will learn the answer the hard way. Wanting convenience is not the same as proving incapacity. You're moving into Maple Pines on Friday, whether you want to or not. My daughter said it the way a principal says detention, already decided. Kimberly stood by the dining room window with her arms crossed and her phone face down like a sealed verdict. The winter sun hit the glass and cut her into a silhouette I didn't quite recognize. She was wearing one of those black work dresses that looks like it could be armor. I had a dish towel in my hands with a worn blue stripe down the middle. I folded it in half and then in half again. If the Lord ever gave me a superpower, it's that the quieter I get, the more dangerous it is to assume I'm agreeing. She continued, as if continuity could pass for kindness. We did the tour. The courtyard room is open. I paid the hold deposit. They'll come with a van. Evan has a buyer for the house. It's cash as is, Mom. You won't have to lift a finger. I thought of all the fingers I have lifted on greasy cafeteria trays, sorting French fries straight with a plastic spatula at the high school for 16 years, stitching prom hems at the kitchen table at midnight under the good lamp, spooning applesauce into a fevered 5-year-old while the humidifier rattled like a small train. I thought of Kimberly at 5 with croup, her little chest lifting and falling like faith itself. I was the one who counted those breaths and bargained with God. I'm the one who learned to give breathing treatments by flashlight the night a windstorm knocked the power out and the neighborhood smelled like splinters. I don't say any of that. I say, "Do you want meatloaf or pot roast?" She blinked like I'd answered a different question. "Mom, Friday." I said, "We've got potatoes. We'll do them in the oven with rosemary. You always liked rosemary." She said, "It's not about food. This house is too much for you. The stairs, the maintenance. You fell in October, remember?" "I tripped on a rug," I said. "What if you break a hip?" "What if I don't?" I asked. Her jaw did that little tick it did when she was 13 and thought curfew was up for debate. Her hair, that sleek chestnut she pays good money to keep from getting the silver I earned, shined in the light. She said, "I can't keep supporting this. This is the responsible choice. I have a life, Evan has projects. We can't be running over here every time your phone goes to voicemail." "Do you want coffee?" I asked. She didn't take the coffee. She left in that busy cloud that always trails behind her, and I stood at the sink and didn't cry, because when the first flood threatens, I hold. The kettle screamed and I set it off the burner. The steam curled my glasses. On the fridge, pinned under a magnet from Sunrise Diner, where Rhonda saves me the pie with the heavy whipped cream, a yellow sticky note waited that I hadn't put there. Maple Pines, hold deposit, Friday, 10 a.m., Kim. Under it, in blocky printing that I didn't want to be familiar but was, another line. Open house, sat, if papers are signed, Evan. That sticky note was not a suggestion. That sticky note was a clock. I washed the mug twice. I put the dish towel over the oven handle the way Robert did so it hung straight. The house hummed the way old houses hum, a loose vent tapping when the furnace kicks on, the neighbor's dog scooting his paw across the chain link, a train far off making a long, lonely noise that always sounded like the world thinking. I went to the cedar box Robert made our first Christmas out of leftover closet shelving, the one that still smells like pencil shavings. Inside, I laid out the neat life people think old women don't have. Property tax receipts rubber-banded by year, insurance policy declarations, a folder labeled utilities that I keep more out of stubborn pride than need, and the durable power of attorney I signed in 2016 naming Kimberly because my knees were getting tricky and I thought being prepared meant you were safe. I remember the day we signed that document. We did it at the UPS store because it was next to Hy-Vee and we were already out getting milk. The notary was a pleasant woman with chipped acrylic nails who said, "You can revoke this any time you want, you know," like someone offering a breath mint. I tucked that sentence away under the category of peanut butter in the pantry and spare flashlight batteries.
I called Dr. Patel at 9:05 the next morning. I told him my request like it was about the weather. "Doctor, I need a letter that says I'm of sound mind." He didn't ask me why, bless him. "Come by at 2, Ruth," he said. At 10, I took the city bus downtown. The driver knew my street and my name because small blessings still exist. I sat by the window and watched the bronze children reading on the bench outside the library slip by. Their faces shined from hundreds of hands. The courthouse sits on the corner like a square-shouldered aunt who's seen everything. The woman at the probate window had a scarf the color of corn silk and eyes that knew the difference between questions and pleas. I said, "I'd like information on revoking a power of attorney," like I was asking for a pamphlet on spring lawn care. She slid me a one-page handout under the glass and said, "If you want, we have a senior rights clinic on Thursdays. No judgment here, sweetheart." On the way out, I stopped at the bulletin board and took down a flyer for a quilting circle at the VFW on Thursdays at 6. I was already thinking about where I could sit and who might need a hem corrected. When you're being ushered somewhere you didn't choose, it changes you to remember all the places you still can choose. By lunch, I was at First River Credit Union with a patient woman named Sasha, who wore studs in both ears and had hands that made you think of warm pie crust. She explained a revocable living trust to me like she'd been waiting all week for me to ask. "You remain the trustee while you're capable," she said. "You can name a successor you trust. The house can be titled into the trust, which avoids probate and keeps control with you. We'll also set up transfer on death designations for your accounts. I do not want my daughter to be able to sell my house out from under me," I said. I didn't put sugar on it. Sugar is for pie, not paperwork. "That's exactly what this is for," she said. She slid a manila folder toward me with tabs. Revocation, trust draft, TOD deed. Bring 2 witnesses tomorrow. We'll notarize. We move at your pace. I ate a tuna melt at Sunrise Diner, sat at the counter so I could watch the waitresses glide like girls on skates, and didn't cry into my pie. I drew a circle around Thursday in my purse calendar so dark the paper nearly gave way. That night, Kimberly stopped by with groceries and let the paper bags thump onto the table. No eye contact, just items thudding down. The clock on the stove said 6:12. The bag had things I hadn't asked for. Protein shakes with labels that promise a lot, microwavable mashed potatoes, a brochure tucked between soup cans as though it were a coupon, Maple Pines Assisted Living, an older woman sitting on a bench like a brochure thinks we all sit. "They do bingo on Tuesdays," Kim chirped, reading directly from the entertainment section. "You'll make friends. You don't have to worry about stairs. It's safer." "I already have friends," I said. "We complain about the county plow together. We water each other's peonies." You'll have more, she said. Anyway, it's decided. Do you want coffee? I asked her. She had to know by then that my coffee means muchas palabras. She didn't have time, she said. Evan's waiting in the car. We need to talk to the contractor. What contractor? I asked, though I could feel the answer tightening like a knot. The one for your kitchen, she said. After you're settled, we'll open this wall up, make a pass-through to the dining room. It'll sell better. My kitchen, I said. I didn't say it loud. I said it like I was practicing the weight of it in my mouth. When she left, I stood in the doorway until the red of their taillights disappeared and the street went back to its regular darkness. At 1 a.m, I heard her voice on the phone in the hall, low and even. Yes, Friday. No, she won't put up a fight. She's tired. Evan's got the listing paperwork ready. Once I'm guardian, it's simple. People say the word guardian like it means angel. It doesn't always. At 8 the next morning, I went 2 doors down to Joyce Miller. Joyce taught 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary for 32 years and runs on decaf and kindness. She answered the door in a robe with daisies on it and said, "Honey, who died?" "Nobody. Not yet. Do you have room in your day to come with me to sign some papers tomorrow?" She went very steady in the face and said, "Put on your shoes, I'll drive." Dr. Patel's letter was 3 sentences long and the most beautiful English I've read since Robert's note that said, "If we sell the Buick, we can put the money into the roof before winter." Dr. Patel wrote that I was oriented to person, place, and time. He wrote that I understood the nature and consequences of my decisions. He signed with his tidy P. People think freedom is a door swinging wide. Often, it's a piece of paper with a date and a name. The senior rights clinic smelled like coffee and copier toner, which is to say, like rescue. A pro bono attorney named Mr. Raines read my papers with his finger in the air like a conductor. "We'll revoke the 2016 POA today. We'll draft a new healthcare power naming someone you trust. If anyone files for guardianship, your doctor's capacity letter and these updated documents make that a steep hill. We also advise securing your deed. Many people titled their home to their living trust. You remain the trustee. The key is these are your choices."
People keep acting like my choices are a neighborhood yard sale, I said. "They're not," he said, and something unclinched in my rib cage. At the credit union, Sasha slid the revocation across the desk. "2 witnesses," she said. Joyce raised her hand like she was in 2nd grade again. An office manager named D came over and signed with a flourish, like a woman who's done this enough times to know it is holy. Sasha stamped, the copier hummed. She made me a neat packet of originals and a packet of copies because organized people put the world back where you found it. I put the folder in my tote bag the way some women put a newborn in a car seat, checked the zipper twice, and went home to sweep the kitchen floor even though it was already clean. I sleep light when I'm tethered. That night, every sound had a shape. Friday dawned pale and thin, like a promise a person makes because they're supposed to. A van that never came was supposed to come at 10 o'clock. Kimberly arrived at 9:40 with a tote bag like she thought I might forget toothpaste and the stories that live in the walls. "They'll be here soon," she said, looking around my living room as if staging furniture in her mind. "Do you want me to get the photo box you can take?" "We're not going to Maple Pines," I said. "I make coffee." "Mom," she said. I set the folder on the table. "Sit down," I said, and I used the same voice I used when she almost ran into the street after a plastic grocery bag once because it looked like a ghost. She sat. "This is a revocation of the power of attorney you hold. This is a living trust. The house is titled into it. I am the trustee.
Joyce is the successor trustee if I get hit by a bus and you can't talk me out of it. This is a letter from Dr. Patel stating I'm competent to make my own decisions. This is a list of my medications in my handwriting taped to the inside of my cabinet door because I am not chaos. I am not going anywhere I do not choose to go. She laughed, a small, brittle sound that belongs to a different kind of weather. Where did you even... Mom, you don't understand how dangerous it is for you to live alone. I've been living alone since your father died, I said. I make my own soup. I know how to call 911. I have a grab bar in the tub, and I know the difference between help and control. Evan sells houses, I said. I built one. My kettle screamed, and I let it. 10:05 came and went. 10:20, she paced. She texted someone by stabbing the letters like they'd offend her. I blew on my coffee and didn't burn my lip because I learned long ago you can want something hot and wait anyway. Are you serious right now? She said finally. As serious as the day I signed your permission slip so you could go with the choir to Minneapolis, even though I was scared the highway would swallow the bus. As serious as the night I drove you to urgent care with your inhaler in your hand and your eyes the size of dimes. As serious as the time you pocketed a pack of gum at Kmart and I marched you back in to apologize to a man with a name tag that said Larry. Her mouth made a small O. For a second, I could see little Kim in there, the one who wrote me a note in orange marker that said, I love you all the way to Jupiter and back, and then taped it to the refrigerator like it would hold us both in place. She left before noon without the tote bag. The house exhaled. Joyce and I walked to the river that night because it was too cold not to feel brave. Teenagers practiced skateboard tricks against the low wall, and a woman my age tucked a dachshund into her coat like a loaf of bread. A blue heron stood in that meditative way they do, pretending it's a statue. We didn't talk for a while. When we did, Joyce said, You did a big thing. I feel small, I said. Small like a seed, not small like a crumb. On Monday, a letter from the courthouse arrived, notice of hearing. Kimberly had filed for emergency guardianship. The world did that tilt thing it does when somebody pulls a rug you don't even remember you were standing on. I read it twice, put it back in the envelope, and set the kettle on. I called Mr. Raines. Bring your folder. Bring yourself. Tuesday morning, I sat under flickering fluorescence outside courtroom 2B with my navy folder in my lap and my church dress with the tiny navy flowers on, because if I was going to be judged, I'd go in like a person and not a plea. Kimberly and Evan sat across from us. His tie was too shiny. She had that look she wears to board meetings, where I assume people say synergy and forget to check the time. I made a grocery list in my head because grocery lists are a kind of prayer. Eggs, milk, butter, green beans, a small roast if it's on sale, cinnamon. The judge had hair like steel wool and the kind of eyes that say, You cannot startle me, I have taught middle school. Kimberly went first. She spoke like she speaks to waiters, soft and tidy with a small tip of superiority. My mother is confused. She forgets things. She doesn't answer her phone. She fell in October. She leaves the stove on. She paused for effect like some people pause so their perfume can arrive. Do you live with your mother? The judge asked.
No, Kim said. Do you visit daily? No, Kim said, but thank you, the judge said. She looked at me. Mrs. Whitaker? I handed up the folder like a person hands up a baby to be held by someone else who is careful. Mr. Raines spoke like watching the radar. Clear, no thunder where none is called for. Revocation of prior POA. New healthcare power naming a neutral party, Ms. Miller, as agent. Living trust with Ms. Whitaker as trustee. home titled into said trust by recorded deed, letter from Dr. Patel regarding capacity, photographs of freezer contents labeled by date in the respondent's handwriting, list of medications taped inside kitchen cabinet, a voicemail left on Ms. Whitaker's line by petitioner referencing planned guardianship prior to any evaluation. He didn't say gotcha. He didn't have to. He let the documents say their names. The judge read like a person who can tell if you've washed your hands. She sighed once. The courtroom had one of those old wall clocks that hums like a bee. Outside the window, a city worker in a neon vest loaded orange cones onto a truck. The mundane kept doing what it does. Then the judge set the file down and looked at Kimberly like she might look at a woman who had forgotten a simple kindness and needed reminding. Miss Stone, wanting convenience is not the same as proving incapacity. She turned to me. Mrs. Whitaker, do you understand the nature of your property and your decisions? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Very much so. Petition denied, she said. Kimberly's face did not do relief. It did not do rage. It did that thing a face does when the mirror tells you something you weren't asking. Outside the courtroom, she stood stiff as a church pew and said, I was trying to help. I know, I said. I also know the difference between help and a hand on my shoulder that turns into a shove. You've always made me feel like the bad guy, she said, and I recognize the script people use when their plans are the main character. No, I said gently. You're just not the only grown-up in the room. Joyce drove me home with the radio low. We stopped at Fairway for strawberries because if you don't buy strawberries in season, you're admitting defeat, and defeat is not in my pantry. The cashier was a teenager with a nose ring and the open face of someone who hasn't yet learned how to hide. How's your day? She asked. And I said, hard and good. And to her credit, she nodded like that was a real answer. That week I toured Bluebird Co-op, the senior apartments near the community garden and the bus stop. I liked that the hallways didn't smell like bleach. I liked that the manager said, we don't do forced move-ins. We don't do that drama here. I liked the corner unit with light that made you think a person could keep plants alive. I put my name on the list not because I had to leave, but because I wanted to know I could leave with my own key in my own pocket, a thing no one asks your permission to feel. I kept my routines because they were still mine. Church on Sunday, where Pastor Linda's voice lands in your bones like a blanket. Bingo on Tuesday at the VFW, where Earl calls out the numbers too fast and pretends he doesn't. I baked a meatloaf and wrote freeze by Friday on the foil with a Sharpie, because sometimes you remind yourself you're alive with a joke so small you might miss it if you blink. Kim didn't call for a while. Then one afternoon, she came alone, without the tote bag, without Evan's voice trying to be the adult in the room that wasn't his. She stood on my porch and looked past me into the living room like somebody who's peeking into a chapel she doesn't quite believe in. You really did all that, she said. I did. You really did all that. Why didn't you let me take care of things? Because you were taking over, I said. Those are not the same. She leaned against the rail Robert painted the summer we thought paint would keep time from noticing us. Evan says I overreacted. Evan is correct. She made a small sound that wanted to be a laugh and got lost on the way. They said you had a list on your cabinet? I like lists. They remind me I'm the one doing the living. I don't know how to let you be old without losing you. You don't have to let me be anything, I said. You have to love me loud and leave my decisions alone until I ask. She nodded. She didn't say sorry because sometimes people have to practice it in their car first, but she breathed in a way I could hear. That was plenty for day one. Sunday, I took chili to Joyce in a Dutch oven that has 5 chips in the enamel and a history I could narrate better than the weather. We ate at her kitchen table with the sun landing on our wrists like coins. We talked about the quilt the VFW ladies are putting together for the county fair. I offered to do the binding because I am good at finishing. Bluebird called a week later. We have a corner unit open, the manager said. Faces the lilacs. I'll come see it. I'll bring my folder." "Why the folder?" she asked, laughing. "It reminds me I get to be the person who says yes." I didn't move out of fear. I moved because the porch faced the lilacs and the bus stops right out front. And on Thursdays, the community room turns into a quilting circle that needs a woman who can mend a hem without leaving a scar. I sold the riding mower to the neighbor boy who mowed my yard 3 summers running and told me last year he was saving for a used Ford Ranger. I gave Robert's extra toolbox to a kid who looked like he might build something, and I told him to return the sockets he didn't use to the right spot because good men put tools back where they go. I left the hydrangeas in the ground because they were never really mine to begin with. I wrote the new address on a sheet of paper and stuck it to the fridge with the magnet from Sunrise Diner, and then I stood there for a full minute because small, brave acts sometimes feel like cliffs. Kim came the day I signed the lease. She brought good coffee in a paper cup from downtown and 2 cinnamon rolls in a white box tied with string like decency. "For your first morning," she said. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it like a firm handshake. Before she left, she touched the folder on the counter with the tip of one manicured finger. "Are you really going to keep dragging that thing around?" "Yes," I said. "It's lighter than it looks." She smiled with only one side of her mouth, the way she did when she was 12 and tried on my lipstick and swore she hated it while refusing to wipe it off. Moving day was a Wednesday that looked like it had been pressed between book pages. 2 boys from the church youth group carried my boxes and argued about whether the Cubs had any hope this year. I labeled everything like a teacher: kitchen, bedroom, keep close, and one box titled "Only on Bad Days," which held a photograph of Robert on the roof with his thumb up, a scarf my mother knit when Nixon was still on television, and the note Kimberly wrote in orange marker to Jupiter and back. Joyce supervised, which means she kept a list and a cookie tin full of lemon bars within reach. We left the house so clean you could have eaten an egg off the porch rail. I locked the door and put the key in my pocket like it was a small holy thing. Bluebird Co-op smells like lemon oil and someone's cinnamon toast. My corner unit has a window that frames the sky like a picture people spend money on. The first night, I stood by that window and watched other people's kitchens light up like small stages. Somebody burned their toast, and the smoke alarm chirped, and then surrendered. Somebody danced in sock feet to a song I couldn't hear. Somebody cried quietly at the sink and then laughed because the cat did something foolish. Life, in other words, continued. I pressed my palm to the glass and felt nothing but the warmth of being my own person. The next morning, I walked to the community garden and put my name down for a plot, because if you can put your hands in dirt and make something grow, you are not at the end of anything. At the quilting circle that evening, a woman named Darlene, who wears her reading glasses on a chain, asked me what block I prefer, and I said log cabin because who doesn't love a center that holds? I mended a hem for a widow who said thank you like I'd taken a stone out of her shoe. I laughed more than I expected to. It all felt like the right wrong size at first, and then by the time I walked back to my corner unit, it felt like the exact right size. Kim called on Sunday. "Can I bring Maddie by?" she asked. "She wants to see your new place." "Of course," I said. Maddie is 12 going on governor, and she's the one who asks questions other people don't know how to. She walked in and said, "Grandma, why is your window better than ours?" And I said, "Because I went shopping and I picked the one with the best view." That made her grin. We ate cinnamon rolls on napkins and looked at the lilacs. Kim looked around in that cautious way people do when they're measuring if the world will keep hating them after they admit they messed up. She said, "I like the light." I said, "It tells the truth. Can I hang a shelf for you?" And she pulled a level from her tote like an apology written in Home Depot. She hung a shelf straight on the 3rd try and swore under her breath the way I used to, and then looked embarrassed, and I laughed until she did too. When she left, she leaned against the doorframe and said, "I'm working on it." Me too. I got a postcard 2 weeks later from Maple Pines with a picture of their courtyard waterfall that looks like a fountain in a mall. "We still have a room for you, and we would love to welcome you soon," it said. I put it in the drawer with the extra batteries and the birthday candles because some things are useful and some things are just to remind you what you didn't pick.
I settled into a rhythm that suited the bones I have. Coffee with Joyce on Tuesdays after bingo, where we argue about whether Earl actually cheats. He does. The farmer's market on Saturday mornings, where a man with a handlebar mustache sells sourdough that tastes like secrets. Church on Sundays, where I hand out bulletins and feel very official. Dr. Patel called to ask how I was adjusting, and I told him the truth. Some nights I still wake up at 3 so sure a van is coming that I sit on the edge of the bed and let my heart argue with itself. But I also told him I planted beans and they came up like tiny, brave soldiers, and I can feel the difference between fear and excitement again. One afternoon, I took the bus over to the cemetery to see Robert. I stood by the headstone and brushed dirt off the W with my thumb and told him the whole story from sticky note to corner unit like he'd come in midway through a movie. I said, I didn't do revenge, honey. I did a boundary. I told him about Kimberly's level and how straight the second shelf looked and how crooked the first one was if you looked just right. I told him about the boy with the Ford Ranger. I told him about the straw hat Darlene wears like a halo. The wind tugged at my jacket and the sun landed on the stone, warm as a hand. I keep the folder on a shelf by the door. It's not because I think someone's coming to knock and tell me I need to prove I'm me again. It's because sometimes I like to touch it on my way out to the bus. It weighs the same as freedom if you could put freedom on a scale in your bathroom and squint at the number. Kim has coffee with me now on Thursdays once a month. Sometimes we talk about work. Sometimes we talk about nothing. Sometimes she stares out the window and says, I feel like I'm losing time. And I say, then stop scheduling it like it's the enemy. And we both laugh because sincerity is our least fashionable skill. She brought me a framed photo last week of the 3 of us at the county fair circa 1998, all sunburned and smiling like we meant it. I found this in a box, she said. I forgot how happy we were. We were tired, I corrected gently, but tired inside a happiness we made. We have not turned into a Hallmark movie. There are days she texts like a boss and calls like a task. There are days I feel like I'm explaining gravity to someone who never had to learn how to fall. But there are also small moments that count for more than they should. Last Tuesday, when I left my reading glasses on the bus, she drove the 20 minutes to Bluebird with a spare pair in a drugstore bag and a pint of ice cream because she said crisis is relative. She stood in my kitchen while I scooped, and she looked very human. I'm sorry I scared you, she said finally. There it was, soft and late and real. I said, you scared me because I love you. You scared me because you used the word help like a ladder and climbed on my head. She laughed and then covered her mouth, and I saw the girl who once tried to dye her hair purple in our downstairs bathroom and stain the shower curtain and cry because she thought I would be mad. I wasn't mad then either. I bought a new curtain and we ate grilled cheese on the back steps. At the quilting circle last night, Darlene told me her son keeps asking if she considered Florida, as if moving states could fix the loneliness that's spelled like a name. She said, how did you do it? Draw the line without starting a war. I carried a folder. I used my inside voice. I made coffee. I said no the way I say grace, steady and daily. I did not ask permission to be a person. I left out the part where I stood in the kitchen in the dark after the courtroom and cried quietly with my forehead against the cool cabinet door. I left out the part where I listened for the van that never came for 3 nights running. Not everything you survive needs an audience. But I told her the most important piece in case it was the key she needed. The difference between being taken care of and being taken over is whether you're still holding your own pen. Sometimes I look at the hydrangeas when the bus goes past my old street. They're thriving without me, which feels exactly right. I like to think the boy with the Ford Ranger put the mower away in his garage like a crown, that the kid with the socket set learned the satisfaction of a ratchet clicking home. I like to picture my old porch rail as clean as we left it, waiting in the sun for whoever leans on it next. If you've been with me all this way, I'll tell you the one thing I wish someone had told me. You are allowed to choose your life, even if people you love have other plans. You're allowed to say, I'll tour that senior co-op when I'm ready, not when the van is idling. You're allowed to keep your keys and your recipes and your porch chairs and your pen. You are allowed to be old without being overruled. If you listen to the end, drop a 1 so I know you're out there. If this made you check your own papers, drop a pen emoji, just a little blue pen, so we can be a quiet chorus of people who still sign our names. I'll see you next week. I'll bring the chili and I'll save you a lemon bar.